Running Sentences presents Wasteland City, a tale of lost memories. Part 3, Twisted Path. Mustang finds that things are getting complicated in what he thought was a simple rundown of information task. The more he digs, the more nothing adds up, and things seem to be getting much more tangled. This is a work of fiction. Names, characters, businesses, events, and incidences are products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to actual people, living, dead, or actual events is purely coincidental and imagined. Copyright 2021, Michael Honore. All rights reserved. Mayor the Smoke Huntington sat behind his desk while Mustang and X stood across from him. Mustang did his best to keep his jaw from dropping. The mayor, having just turned down his simple request, was unusual in all manners, as he was easy to get on your side. That is, as long as one turned in results that he liked. "Excuse me, Mayor? I was mistaken to ask you to do a job, as you always ask more in return than you give out. Pity, really. I could use someone to replace Ugly. Oh well, maybe Fuckwolf will be more interested. Give me the job and give me the pass for my associate." "Why should I do that?" "Because that way you'll get the information and exactly what you wanted without it costing you down the road and into the gutter. You don't want the town bankrupt already, do you? Fuckwolf will only sell whatever he finds onto the highest bidder. Do you want to double your price? Or do you want it done?" "Fuck. Fine. Go down to the basement and tell them to make you two a special pass. One-time deal. That's it." Mustang, not wasting further time, quickly turned and grabbed X and headed out of the mayor's office. They hurried back to the landing and then got around the stairs to be able to get away from the mayor. Mustang and X were soon hurrying across the lobby towards a small sign above a small door which said basement. Soon they found themselves heading down another set of stairs, only this set was poorly lit, and they emerged into a dark basement-level area. A few lamps burned their lights here and there, but gave them no sign of where to go. Carefully they stepped further into the basement, trying to get a feel for the stuffy place that was much like X's bedroom, which was stuffed to the gill with things that seemed to be out of place. When they came around a bunch of boxes towards a section with a light, they found a little hallway burrowed through the stacks of things onto the other and leading to another side. At the end of this was a door that announced itself to be the Hall Pass Club. X and Mustang looked over at one another and then shared a shrug as they walked over towards the door, giving it a good knock before trying the handle. It opened with a loud and protracted protesting creak. A blazing row of light illuminated a figure at the desk, with his head down, scribbling something down into a book. The figure, without looking up, waves them in as they stand in the doorway, casting a bit of shadow. Mustang and Axe both stepped further in, with Mustang leading the way, unsure if he should speak up or not. The figures looked up, revealing a shadowy female face, creased with worry and curiosity. Sorry to interrupt. It's just that the mayor asked us to come down here to get a pass to cross to the upper section of town on official business, if this is the place." "Give me a minute." The woman rose shakily from her chair and then headed off to the right. She picked up 2 objects from a nearby box and then came back over to her desk. From what Mustang could see, it looked like a stamp and 2 papers. She looked up at them. "What are your names?" "I'm Hugh Mustang and this is X." The woman scrawled something onto each piece of paper and then, with a heavy stamp, stamped the pieces of paper and then carefully examined them and handed them over. "These passes will give you 24 hours in the upper city section of town. Should anyone bother you, flash them and they will probably scurry away. Now, you need to scurry away so I can get back to my work." Mustang grabbed the 2 pieces of paper and beat a hasty retreat back out of the office. As they made their way back out of the town hall to find that the early night was beginning to settle in, but keen not to waste his pass and come back the next morning, Mustang proceeded towards the wall and its gate. X trailed behind him, looking more or less at the twinkling stars in the night sky and trying to figure out what they were. He seemed to be caught up in that and what they were offering as they approached the guard's gate to the wall. A few people had queued up in the line, to which Mustang joined, and he made sure that X did not wander off, staring at the stars. Thankfully, it was only a short line, and they were quickly at the guard station, with the guard holding out his hand for the passes. Mustang handed them over, to which the guard briefly glanced them over, and then, with a raised eyebrow, looked between the two, and then, looking hard at X. "Oh, you're the guy that came through here a couple of days ago, all drunk. I remember that face of sort." "What? You know him? You know Mr. X?" "Do I know you?" I don't know him. But you saw him, guard." "Do you know who I am?" I don't know him, but you saw him. A few days ago, I was here at the guard station. 2 men carried him from the upper city down below. I don't remember what they said or looked like, as they didn't really look up at me or anything. Don't really need a pass to go back down the city." X looked like he was trying to remember all of this, but his face was troubled and it didn't seem to be coming to him. I don't think I recall any of that at all." "Well, damn. Well, at least we have some information. How many days ago was this, guard? Tell us, please." "About 3 or so days ago. It's all a blur of how things go." "Right, about when X here was discovered draped over an altar." "Great, and thanks. If you remember anything else, just search out Hugh Mustang. You'll find me around town." The guard handed back their pass and waved them through. Neither X nor Mustang taking up a further moment of the guards' time, as they wanted to get through. They found themselves walking up a well-lit road, with Mustang keeping a careful watch over X to see if he would react to anything. However, the young man seemed more interested in the buildings that they passed, and X came to a stop in front of one shop. "Rem's Fine Tailor, is that the place we were looking for?" Mustang, really not been paying much attention, stopped and then came back around to look. Indeed, there was a shop with a sign proclaiming that, and even better, there appeared to be a light burning inside. "Was the shop the tailors told us that made your clothes? Let's see if they're open." They headed for the door of the shop and pulled it open, Mustang holding it open for X to let him go in first, and he followed in. The interior of the shop was not what they expected at all. The front of the place was indeed crowded with racks of clothing all pushed near the window, but beyond that was an empty space. That was aside from an old man who sat by a fireplace in a rocking chair, rocking back and forth, of course. The old man didn't pay the least bit of attention to them as they approached, and Mustang cleared his throat with a cough to try and draw the man's attention, but he does nothing to stop the rocking. Hello, mister?" The old man looks up and over at them. He stares for a second, then slowly stops rocking in the chair. When he'd come to a full stop, he jumped from his chair, flinging himself about in a lively manner that didn't suit his old body. "Customers! It's been a week since I've had one of these. What can I do for you, gentlemen? Need some fancy clothes? They need to dress up for some fine ladies? Or maybe dress them up?" No, sir. We're looking into some matters involving this young man, who was seen wearing some of your clothes. You see, he's lost his memory, and we wondered if you would know him." "I don't know him. Never seen him in my life, though I do take orders from people who I never see." "Really? Man, I was starting to hope so. I was starting to get my hopes up that I'd learn something from this, and this whole trip would suddenly spring my mind free, and my head is just... Axe had turned and sulked away towards the racks of clothing as Mustang watched, trying to figure out what to do. He figured he should go over to Axe, but the young man had quickly disappeared into racks and racks of clothing. Listen, tailor person, did you know or work for any of the Bonapartes or their family?" "I'd have to check. But what's that got to do with your friend?" "Maybe everything, or maybe nothing. I don't know yet, and I'm here under orders from the mayor to find out such stuff. Do you wish to piss him off?" The tailor offered a shrug of indifference, then looked around him to see what X was up to. But since he couldn't see the young man, he turned his attention squarely back to Mustang. "The mayor's nothing but a bad puppet. He couldn't threaten a fly without being smacked around and taken out back for all his money." "Well, if you would please just find out about the Bonaparte family has been here." The old tailor glared at him for a second before trotting off to the corner of the shop to pick up some books there. Mustang took a chance to head for the clothing rack to fish out X from among the piles. It didn't take him long to get him out, as he hadn't gone deeply into the 3 racks of stuff. Why are we still here, Mustang? We can learn about the Bonapartes, and if we can learn about them, at least we have a direction to go, and some things should make sense, hopefully. Coming back from the corner, the old tailor carried a book that he was looking through as he walked. Would this be a recent or older transaction? Newer, within the past few weeks. The tailor sticks his head back into the book, turning a few pages, and then came up looking at X with narrowed eyes. I do remember a young lady and an older lady who came in throwing the name around. It says so in here in the book, anyway. Said it was for a young man, and looking over at that young man right there, I say they'd measure about the right fit for what they sought. X perked up at this. Who were they? They didn't say, but they did leave a calling address to the bold Bonaparte home. It's up the street about 5 blocks on the main road. Big black structure with hints of red accenting the place. I made a delivery of clues to them in the past week. Couldn't get the sight of the place out of my mind if I wanted to. It's creepy. Mustang approached. Thank you very much, as he stepped over to the old tailor with a few coins in his hand. But the old man recoiled in horror. Realizing his mistake and that nobody in the rich section of town was pressed for money, Mustang beat an embarrassed retreat to the door and was soon followed out of the establishment by X. The rush up the road to find the house was a relatively easy one, as it was the only one of that color combination. X stopped and stared at the building as Mustang climbed the stairs to go to the door and could see inside. Glancing through the side windows, he did his best to look, but it was all dark. It was a surprise to him, as there was no real activity. The upper crust of society rarely went to bed early, and to see a dark house just didn't feel right. He knocked on the door, which opened upon the force of his knock, and X came bounding up the stairs to see what was going on. It feels familiar, this place, but I don't know why. Have we been invited in? No, the door opened by itself. Well, I knocked and it opened. From what I can tell, anyway. Shall we go in? Is it safe? Judging from the way the upper crust of society deals with things, no, it is probably not. Oh, well, if it is an adventure, then we must go in and see what comes of it. Are you crazy, X? No, but just to be sure, what is crazy? Mustang paused to try and come up with a good answer. X, however, had walked inside, leaving Mustang to scramble after him. The dark interior of the place only had light coming in from outside, pouring in through the doorway. X stood in the center of the foyer, trying to look around, but a little light wasn't good enough to see anything. Mustang had stumbled about until he found a switch and flipped it. The main chandelier in the room hummed for a second before flickering on as it cast its light about the place. With the room lit, both of their eyes fell on the banner hanging in the foyer, wishing Corsair Bonaparte a happy birthday. Well, we know what the Bonapartes were doing here, but what the family doesn't appear to be here. Either the branch of the family that was here was celebrating, or somebody's decided to come claim that name. Maybe. Hello? The words echoed about the empty space, and they looked at one another, and then looked about the empty space once more. Shall we look about, Mr. X, and don't go shouting hello anymore, please? X nodded to this, and they two set off towards the door, just on their right side. Upon entering the dark room, they stumbled a bit as boxes standing knee-high stood in their way. With the boxes mostly kicked out of the way, they peer into the room. This time, X finding the switch and lighting up the room. The place was dusty and filled with books. There was little room to maneuver any further. I don't think in here is going to help. No, it doesn't seem like it's been touched in quite a while. On to the next room. X flipped the switch back over, plunging the room back into the darkness as they abandoned it. As they exited the study, the little vase that was next to the door exploded from a gunshot. The Mustang pushed the young man to the floor, sending him tumbling down and jumping the other way as the wall behind them took the next bullet. What's going on? Robbers! Thieves! Swindlers! It appears there is a guard with a gun that doesn't like us being here. Another shot rang out, chipping off the floor near Mustang, who then rolled away. What do we do, Mustang? Get out of here by crawling to the door as quickly as you can. They hurried as best they could between the gunshot blasts that got close but never offered harm, managing just to get out the door as in a flash as more shots followed. X jumped out onto the outside stairs to the road with Mustang in hot pursuit. They paused for a second to catch their breaths, but Mustang, not wanting to stick around, grabbed the young man and headed further up the road. After a block or two, they finally slowed down and then looked back to see nothing out of the ordinary. All of the clean streets sat there undisturbed by someone chasing after them. Did we lose the whatever you called them? Might not have chased after us after we left. Anyway, I have a perfect place for us to lie low for a few minutes. Come with me. The two proceeded further down the road until Mustang took a detour off the main road and down a little side road that went a few feet and then knocked on the door. They waited a second and then the slit slammed open to the door and there was a pair of eyes through the slit peephole. It was then slammed back shut and the second after that the door opened. They entered a well-lit office busy with workers at desks. The pairs of eyes that had glared at them from the door stood in front of them in the form of a large, bulky man. You here see Falkwolf? Yes, if he's available, Eyes. I would like to see him. Follow me. Eyes turned and trundled past the desk towards a doorway in the back of the room. They followed Eyes through a small maze of hallways until they reached the office with a fancy sign emblazoned on it, simply saying, Boss. Eyes knocked and opened the door, and they all went in. The office was a nice, tidy, clean, and all other nice words that Mustang could think of to describe how sanitary the place looked. He found his eyes locked onto the bored-looking Falkwolf, who was glancing at them and then back at his work. Falkwolf, if we could avoid the roundabout pretending that we don't work with one another on the occasion. It was you who put that stipulation out there last time we talked to one another. But fine, what is it you're after? There is a family, the Bonapartes, that came to town and have since gone, or appear to have gone. Their house is empty. I need to know about them. They're from Barrier City, visited a few days for a party of some sort. Son is engaged to a young woman, Katrina Goddard, who doesn't appear to have much of a record or anything about her. It's very suspicious looking into her. But then again, you don't have much of a record either, Mustang. And the drugs that are coming into the city that have everyone hot and bothered? That's a bigger problem. My detectives haven't found out anything substantial yet. Hell, it is only broken jars of the stuff that gets found anyway. And that's why you haven't told the mayor about what you found yet. Can't tell him what I don't know, and besides, you make a much better messenger than I do. Who is this, by the way? X. I found him thrown over an outside prayer altar in the mid-city. He's lost his memories, but we're working on that. Oh, boring stuff. I will say one more thing about the drugs, though. From all we know that it is likely to be coming from Barrier City. The Bonaparte family. Don't know. If that's all you need from me, please be gone. I have work. Mustang held up his hands and retreated from the office. The two soon found themselves back out on the main road, but looking around carefully just in case a lone gunman was out stalking after them. They started heading back towards the wall, with Mustang lost in thought and X staring tentatively at him, trying to suss out what was going on. Mustang? Yep. It feels like we should have learned more back there. I wish we could have, but if we press our luck, then no one is willing to talk. But what do we have? Plenty of info. You were in the upper city and were forced into the middle city. Somewhere along that line, you were attacked. The reason the drugs are coming into the city, I don't know yet, but it will come eventually. Mustang fell silent once again as they went carefully along. They just about reached the wall and were getting ready to cross over when X was grabbed by two rough hands. Ah! Mustang swiveled about to face the sudden noise. Both of his pistols were out of their holsters and ready. However, he found a gun pointed directly at his face, and the dark, brightly lit faces of Constable Detective Frederick and Malik hidden under hats. "Easy there, Mustang. We don't want no troubles." "Then why are you grabbing X?" "He's a suspect in our case. We've decided to take him to the station, Mustang." "What?" The two detectives, however, ignored him as they slapped handcuffs on X's wrists. They dragged him away, with Mustang following. It would only take a few minutes for them to get from the upper city down to the main avenue road to the police station. The shining brick building that proudly had a shield plastered above the door was the only sign showing that it was in fact a police station. Malik and Frederick dragged X up the stairs of the building and into the main entrance. Mustang was quick to follow, brushing past one of the guard officers who tried to stop him. Inside, the detectives continued to drag X from the entrance to the police station lobby towards the back office area. Mustang does his best to keep up, but Frederick drops X's arm and swings around with a gun coming out of his holster. Mustang, however, grabbed Frederick's arm and headbutts the man in the nose. Blood began spurting everywhere from Frederick, and Mustang was tackled by a cop from behind as X was dragged away. "This is madness! Get off of me! Let X go!" The officer who'd grabbed him from behind, however, ignored his request and slapped handcuffs on him and then hauled him to his feet. "I'm Hugh Mustang. I'm working for the mayor. Let me go." They continued to ignore him as they dragged him off back to where the jail cells were. The officers brought Mustang to a jail cell, which they promptly threw him in and then left. Annoyed and frustrated, but also surprisingly alone, he sat down on the ground to wait for someone to come for him. As he waited, however, time continually slipped by, and he soon lost track of it all as he let his eyes close for just a second. A sharp bang and ringing of metal woke him up in the bright early morning light that slipped through the nearby barred window. Mustang blinked a few times, seeing the cell door open and an officer waiting for him outside the cell. He got up as best as he could, shaking off sleepiness, and walked out of the cell. He was then led from the jail section of the building up 2 stories to the section of which he was far more familiar with. He soon found himself sitting in the sheriff's office, with Ugly pacing about the room reading a book. When Ugly passed in front of Mustang, however, the book appeared to be a blank, leaving unsure of why Ugly McGee was going through all this effort. Finally, after another lap around the office, the book was snapped shut and the sheriff turned to face him. "Mustang, you have struck one of my officers." "Your officers were arresting a man on some false charges." "Oh no, these charges will easily stick." "Then what, pray tell, are they?" "He's been charged with impersonating the rich social man, Corsair Bonaparte." "What? But how?" "The man himself, Corsair, showed up and told us that there was a man who's parading around town proclaiming to be him. He wanted that situation put to a stop right away." "Yes, but X doesn't even have any memories of his past. How have you narrowed it down to him of all people?" "Followed the evidence that someone rented out the old Bonaparte mansion and had a birthday party there. He obviously came from there as he was spotted by people." "He was also attacked." "Yes, we haven't nailed down what happened yet. But still, until proven otherwise, he shall remain in custody. As for you, Mustang, apologize to Frederick and pay the fine for striking people. I don't want to have to deal with paperwork concerning you." Mustang glowered at Ugly, but the sheriff was no longer paying any attention to him. The sheriff then about-faced and walked out of the office and was gone from sight before Mustang could add anything to this. Free of police custody, he did as Ugly told him to do, though he was sure that the detective, Frederick, probably wasn't going to fully accept his apology, and he figured he should watch his back. As he exited the police department, he glanced back at it, trying to figure out what his next step would be. He could head back to the office empty-handed, or go to the mayor's office empty-handed. Not that he had much to report to the mayor to smoke. He soon found himself wandering across to the main road and headed for the mayor's office. He'd made it not terribly far from the station when he was violently yanked off the street into a dark side road. Mustang found himself being dragged further and further down this side road. He desperately trying to untangle himself from the stranger's grasp, but it held him in a position that wouldn't allow for that to happen. Plus, every time he tried to grab at the hands, he found his own hands intercepted and they were pushed away. The struggle went on for a few minutes until they stopped at the sound of the door opening, which was then followed by being dragged inside. Once inside, the grip on him relaxed and he soon fell to the ground. He quickly collected himself and stood up ready to fight, but the two who grabbed him simply thumbed there that he should go to the door behind them. Mustang glared at the two, who looked like they were more suited for low-level Wasteland city than the middle of section of town. This was definitely the work of Lucius, as it had the signature calling card of kidnapping when least expecting it. With his head held high, Mustang went over to the door to see what it was the drug lord wanted. He entered an office space that was empty of anything aside from a desk and a door on the far side of the room. He stopped and looked about to make sure he wasn't going to be attacked again. Then, as he started to head for the door on the far side, it opened, and in popped Lucius, holding a mason jar. The criminal looked at him and then walked over to the desk, putting the mason jar down. "Do you know what this is?" "No, Lucius. Should I know what it is, or are we just offering random guesses?" Though he was curious, so he went over and picked it up to see the clear liquid sloshing inside. "The new drug is in there. It's the first time we've managed to get a hold of the stuff, as it usually disappears just when we find out about it." "So, what is it?" "We tested it, sent it to our people at Barrier City, but nothing came from the tests, and our person hasn't been heard from yet. And before you start asking questions, Ben, saying, I just asked you to look into it the other day or so ago. I've been looking into this matter for at least 100 or so days since I first heard of it." "Great. So, we know it's from Barrier City?" "We believe so, yes. We found empty boxes that shipped in, and all have codes printed on them similar to those used in the city of Barrier. By the way, where is your friend that was with you?" "Under arrest for potential impersonation. Reportedly he was trying to be Corsair Bonaparte." "Why does that sound so familiar? Something about it reminds me of the whispers of Augustina mugging. Ugh, this is going to bother me now that I know there's something there." Lucius began to pace about the room as Mustang put the jar back down on the desk. "Isn't she the one that had an hotshot detective agency in Barrier City? She had an amazing record of getting arrests, but there was talk of somehow criminals always going free after a while." "Yes, that's the one, though most people seem to think she's a creation by the cops and Barriers to scare away competition. It's all rumors, I guess, and whatever it was that was troubling my mind isn't coming to me right now." "Well, thank you for keeping me in the loop, Lucius. But you're not going to let me walk out of here with that jar, I know that." Lucius had stopped his pacing and reached into the pocket of his pants to pull out a vial. "Here." He tossed over the vial, which Mustang barely caught and then looked at. Whatever was in the vial looked very similar to the stuff in the jar, and Mustang looked over at Lucius for an answer. "I know the mayor's looking into things as well, but he certainly can't be seen with me. If you could hand it over and get their resources working on it, we'll have a better understanding of what it is." "So that's why you wanted to see me?" Lucius nodded and headed over to the desk, picking up his mason jar, and then, with a middle finger extended towards Mustang, exited the way he came in. Left alone, Mustang could only shake his head in return, and then went out the way he came in. With much of his morning wasted, Mustang found himself back on the main road, caught between heading for the mayor's office to drop off the vial and information or heading home. His feet had already made up their mind before his mind had realized it had come to a decision, and he soon found himself treading his way downwards towards his office. The trip didn't take long, and he soon found himself back on the side road headed to the bookshop. As he approached, he noted the curious sight of the bookshop's door being wide open. He stopped and stared, trying to figure out if something was wrong, and slowly he started towards the door, his hand reaching inside his coat only to realize that he'd never retrieved his pistols from the police. By that time, though, he'd already gotten to the doorway and peeked around to see what was inside. From what he could tell, it all looked normal, and it usually does. Carefully stepping inside and looking around, nothing appeared to be out of order, although all the dust and what few books were there were still where they needed to be. He shuffled his way a few steps further into the shop. "Moneypenny, are you there?" There, however, was no response, and he moved further inside, concerned that something had happened. A small noise came from the back room where Moneypenny had shown him the book of Wasteland City, and he carefully headed towards the noise. Upon getting to the doorway to the back room, Mustang looked inside to try and gauge what was going on. He, however, was greeted by the unusual sight of Moneypenny and Alex both holding knives across from one another in a showdown. They looked like they were fighting. Mustang stepped into the room at once. "What is going on here?" They looked surprised to see him, and came out of their fighting stances, relaxing a bit. "Mustang, what are you doing here? Shouldn't you be asleep?" This, by the way, was just self-defense practice. We weren't really trying to harm one another. "I spent the night in jail and got thrown out in the morning. And anyways, it's the afternoon now. Also, you say you're practicing, but those look like real blades." Moneypenny nodded her head towards Alex. "And we find it to be good training for real life." "You two are mad." Alex grinned. "What got you thrown into jail?" "I hit Detective Frederick after he and Malik. They arrested the young man who I'm calling X. They're drummed up some charges of impersonation." Moneypenny looked on concerned as she stepped forward, sliding her knife into a little hidden scabbard. "What? How?" As Mustang opened his mouth to reply, a loud thunk came from the bookshop. He turned and saw an older woman standing in the doorway with the assistance of a cane. She looked tall, proud, and like she belonged firmly in the upper crust of society, and nowhere would ever be good enough for her. You have us customers, Moneypenny?" "It can't possibly be unless you tattled about it, Alex." "I don't say anything about a bookshop to anyone. My customers generally don't go towards books, so I wouldn't have a chance even if I wanted to." "Mustang?" She might be here because of me. I did leave a note on the posted board of Upper Wasteland, but I don't think anyone has ever paid any attention to such postings." "Excuse me, is there anyone in this awful little place?" With a shrug, Mustang headed out and was followed both by Moneypenny and Alex. As he emerged from the back room, he was instantly the focus of the old lady. She scowled and then took a few steps further in, but watching carefully, so none of the potential dust might get onto her. Emerging from behind her was a younger woman, a beautiful specimen of a woman who was wrapped up in so many clothes that she didn't quite look like she belonged in. Moneypenny took her spot near the cash register and tried to put on a pleasant face. "May I help you, ladies?" "I am looking for a Hugh Mustang." "Well, that's me. What can I do for you?" "I saw your little posted note on the upper wall. I came to inquire about it." "We saw it." "Yes, my soon-to-be daughter-in-law saw the post." "Oh, great. You have information on the young man, then?" "No, we're here to retrieve my fiancé and my son." End of part 3. Thank you for listening.